Hey guys, and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. This is episode 24 of the 2025 season, and after a trip across the Atlantic for the Canadian Grand Prix, we are moving back. F1 is moving back into Europe as we head up the Spielberg track in Austria, the Red Bull Ring track in Austria. I'm your host for this one, Anwar, and in this episode, I am joined by Daniel and Callum. So thank you guys very much for coming on. Firstly, we kind of saw a very exciting end to the Canadian Grand Prix last race weekend. What things do you guys reckon will boil over or impact this weekend in Austria? Because we've had a 2-week break. Do we think there'll be anything that kind of spills over from last weekend into this one? I'll start with Callum here.
I mean, we'd be slated if we didn't obviously talk about the McLaren incident. That was the main talking point from Canada. And it's been a couple of weeks, so Norris has had time to reflect on that incident and build on it. So I think for one part, obviously we're going to talk about McLaren quite a bit, I think, in the preview. So it's going to be interesting to see how Norris bounces back from that. I hope he bounces back from that because he's seriously running out of time, I think. Now, in these next few races in Europe is the time where he really needs to actually get ahead of Piastri and try and get a couple of wins under his belt if he's going to seriously challenge for this Drivers' Championship, because I think it is now starting to slowly slip away from him and he needs some results to turn the tide. Obviously, we know that he's done he's been fairly strong at Austria before. He was battling for the win last time before. Obviously, he had that incident with Verstappen in 2024. And so maybe this time around, this could be the track that he properly brings the fight to Piastri and hopefully he can get a win or two. It will also be interesting as well from McLaren's perspective because obviously before they've allowed their drivers to fight free, but now since Canada, we know what that can lead to. Obviously, that was, as Norris admits himself, that was his fault. So whether they just stick to what their rules are, the papaya rules as we know them as, or they change things up now, especially now as well, they might feel like maybe they want to prioritize one driver over the other. If they are going for this Drivers' Championship, we know that that's probably the mistake they made last season, or one of the probable mistakes they made last season in the fight for the Drivers' Championship is they didn't favor one driver over the other in time. So they might be starting to consider that now. Obviously, at the moment, that's Piastri. So yeah, it's a big weekend to see what they do, both from Norris's perspective, I think, and for McLaren's.
I guess my question to you, Daniel, would be: do we expect McLaren to budge, and do we think that this 2-week break is probably good for all parties involved in terms of that inter-team battle?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any direct fallout resulting from the Canadian incident. Like Callum said, it wasn't very controversial. Norris admitted fault. And Piastri, there weren't any sporting consequences. It was quite lucky that tie didn't puncture, I guess. So in that way, you continue and you could bank that 4th place, those 12 points, which will be no hard feelings then really for him. I don't think they're going to start thinking about prioritising any driver yet. I think last year, yes, they should have prioritised Norris, a bit of a different situation because he was trying to chase down Verstappen for the title. But in this instant, they are, maybe they don't have a comfortable lead, but they have one where they are still in command of the championship and they have the leisure. They are in that privileged position where they can make the decisions when and where they need to later down the line. But it is a bit of a shame on the Norris front to see what kind of the Canada incident has done for his image in the sport, because I remember Nico Rosberg was always a massive Lando Norris fan, always touting him as a future world champion. He's got so much pace. Look what he's doing to Daniel Ricciardo. And then after last weekend, when he was with Sky on his punditry, he was saying that now Oscar Piastri is his tip for the Drivers' Championship when it was so strongly Lando Norris going into the season. So I think that speaks volumes about Piastri's performance, but also Norris's fall off and the pace of McLaren, who, like I said, are in a decent position. I think they'll just go racing as normal this weekend, to be honest.
To be fair, I think that's probably the case for this entire season. I mean, Canada was just one of those single moments really that I think highlighted. I mean, none of us would have been mistaken to think that it was going to be Norris's championship this season. That's what we all thought going into the season, because we knew that the McLaren car was most likely to be the fastest, and we thought, with very good reason, that Norris was going to be the fastest out of the two McLaren drivers. He was certainly the more consistent one last season, and he's showed the better race pace last season. But I still think that Norris can get back to that point, because I think on form, on his day, he can absolutely beat Piastri, no doubt about that. He's shown moments like that where he's proved that, and against his other teammates in previous seasons. But I just think that he's had too many of those mistakes, and that's meant that he hasn't really been able to get going at all, to be honest. Apart from probably Australia, the first race of the season. So it's been a very unfortunate season for him. Canada, I think, really just highlighted that. So I hope he bounces back, but obviously we're going to have to see it in the next couple of races, especially approaching his home race in Britain.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, isn't it? I go back and forward on this, in that we never seem to talk about, except with the exception of Australia, which was an exceptional race, we never seem to talk about Piastri bouncing back. It's always Norris and the kind of the battle that he's always seems to be losing. You know, there haven't been enough moments of victory to kind of convince us that he is, you know, properly ready. I don't know. Of course he's ready, but I don't know. He's too many struggles, I think, this season, and Piastri is having too few for Norris to really capitalise on.
I do actually agree with you on that, to be fair, because we do actually keep saying that he's going to bounce back, but I can't really think of a single race this season, apart from, as you mentioned, apart from Australia, that we've seen that Norris is properly dominating a race. Which is quite a shame to see, really, because as we've already mentioned, he seemed like such a strong contender from last year.
From my perspective, it's not. I think a lot of people have come on and said the exact same type of things as you guys are saying, in terms it's a lot of mistakes. He needs to bounce back, and he is consistently not proving that. I feel like, to me, I'm not really worried about the points at this stage. It's the form that's more of a concern. All I feel like I need to see is a win. Like that's all I want to see at this stage, because I feel that if he gives us a reminder of what he's capable of, I think it shuts up a lot of the doubt and a lot of the discussion around him, because I still think that there's a championship battle here. I think the points tally difference between them isn't nearly enough to suggest that this is a complete open and shut case at all. We need to see something substantial in terms of him laying down the law, putting in a good performance, and going on from there. I think that's all I guess all we need to see, really, from Norris this weekend. Like a comfortable performance where he's confidently driving and essentially has no kind of competition. What he needs is a weekend where he doesn't make a mistake in Q3, and then leads off the line, keeps the lead into turn one, and then he controls the race. That's what I think that will be the key. If he can get that done over Austria here, for example, I think that will do massive in terms of bringing his confidence back to a level where he can compete against Oscar Piastri.
I think that Norris, if he does get a pole position or second or third in qualifying, and gets through the first turn or gets through the first lap of the race in P1, I think he can control the race. But that's been his problem this year, is that he just hasn't he's made some mistakes in qualifying, or he hasn't been completely in line or synchronized with the car compared to Piastri or Verstappen, and that meant that his weekend is kind of over before it's even got started. So I think, as you mentioned quite rightly, Anwar, I think we just need to see him have a good, solid qualifying performance and really be mistake-free in the race, even if it means that he doesn't get first. Just a mistake-free weekend would be a start.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the key for Norris is to be ahead of Piastri at the end of lap 1, because there are occasions where he has outqualified Piastri this year. Look at Miami, but by the end of lap 1, he was behind him. And so when the race came to them and it was just between those two, the gap was too large because Piastri had been able to stretch his legs in the time that it took Norris to make his way through those drivers to get to him. So the Q3 is the most important thing, I think, from Norris this weekend. We've seen so many scrappy ones from him this year. Canada, Bahrain come to mind, Saudi Arabia when he put it in the wall. So I think that should be his focus. That is his focus. He said as much. So I'm curious to see how that'll work out for him.
100%. In terms of moving the discussion onto McLaren and just generally teams as a whole, do you think that they will be a lot more cautious if their drivers are in a similar position where they're, for example, 2 and 3, let's say, at halfway through the race? Do you think they're going to be a little bit more cautious in terms of letting them race?
I really don't know, actually, because they've had these rules that have somewhat worked. Now that I think about it, obviously, I think a lot of McLaren fans are quite angry at Piastri with Monza last year. That was kind of the first proper time that they had to review these papaya rules, and now it's led to them losing points again. So I think maybe they might exercise some caution. I think maybe they might give it until the end of lap 1 or at some point in the race, and then they might say to try and hold position. I'm not too sure, if I'm being completely honest. It might be that, as we've mentioned before, they have quite a nice buffer at the moment. They know that they have the strongest car, and also looking at the weather for Austria as well, it's going to be completely dry, and so it should really favour the McLaren car. So I think maybe we're not at that stage in hindsight, actually changing my mind again, but maybe not quite yet that we're at that point. I think if there's something like this were to happen again, they might start revising those rules and maybe try and ask their drivers to hold position or put in other measures. But I think maybe we're still a bit off of that point yet, if I'm honest. I think it'd be very mean on Norris if they asked him to hold position behind Piastri at this stage.
It's way too early to even have that discussion, right? We're not even halfway through the season. We're discussing driver preference. I don't think that should be the way forward. Let's move on to just discussing who we expect to be near the front, because we kind of hinted at the idea of Mercedes being competitive last weekend, and it turns out they finished 1 and 3 with pole. What are we expecting here? Do we think that Mercedes are capable of maintaining the momentum that they might have coming off the back of their performance in Montreal?
To be honest, the Mercedes race pace has been the most unpredictable factor in F1 since Romain Grosjean on the first lap of the race. I mean, George Russell in Canada, after the race, he said that there were 3 factors that led to the win, which was the temperature of the track, the smoothness of the tarmac and the asphalt, and the corner speed. So if you think about those factors, generally the hotter the temperatures are, the worse they go. Austria is expected to be very hot this weekend, so that won't play into their hands. The smoothness of the track. So Canada's tarmac is a bit more closed, they say, which means that the gaps between the stones are smaller. It's more wear out of the tires and things like that, which won't play into Mercedes' hands. That will kind of play more into McLaren's advantage. So I'm not sure they're going to have that on their side. Corner speed, I mean, there's a good mix of high and low in Austria. So for me, that's kind of neutral, balances it out. So, you really can't predict where Mercedes are going to be. Obviously, we're going to try, which you'll probably see in our predictions, but there's just so little way of knowing. I have faith in George Russell, obviously, to extract the maximum from the car, and Kimi Antonelli's development is going well. So from a driver's point of view, I'm not worried at all. It's just the unpredictability of that car.
Yeah, I think I agree with Daniel. I would be very surprised if I saw Mercedes at the front again. I think personally, or what I've kind of reflected in my predictions, I think that there's a very good chance of a Verstappen pole, because we know how good he is. Obviously, a full-time winner of the circuit before, more than any other driver in history, and we've seen that at points this season where his one lap pace, what he can bring out of that car in one lap on the Saturday, is just completely like blistering pace. But then I think that McLaren's, as we mentioned before, with the conditions favouring the McLaren track so far, I think they'll have better race pace, and so that means that that will give one or both the drivers the chance, which I think, to be honest, will probably be Piastri, the chance to overtake him maybe in the race or into turn one. I think that Russell might be able to get involved, but I think it might be a similar case as we got last year, where there is maybe some kind of significant margin. I do think the Mercedes are going to beat the Ferraris again, though, to be honest. I know that they have, well, what we're probably going to talk about in a minute, that they've got upgrades that are coming to the circuit. I still doubtful of Ferrari. I think I'm always just doubtful of Ferrari, to be honest, and their ability to string together a race strategy. So I think Mercedes might be in quite a lonely third this race, unfortunately, not being able to really do any damage to Verstappen or the two McLarens, but I think they'll still have the Ferraris.
I think that you kind of did the segue for me. Yeah, Ferrari are bringing upgrades, and they're supposedly pretty significant upgrades for Austria here. And off the back of the rumours around Fred Vasseur's position as team principal being under threat, how important is it that they at least show some signs of progress this weekend, Daniel?
Oh, it's crucial for their season, and like you said, for the future of the team personnel, the management, everyone involved, really. For, because we know they're a very emotional team. That is something that Fred Vasseur has tried to work on over the past couple of years when he's been in the team principal role, is kind of making everyone a bit headed, which maybe means slightly less joy after a win. But then again, when they have those inevitable tough races, which Ferrari seem to have all too often nowadays, kind of maintaining their emotionality in those types of situations. I think the biggest thing for Ferrari is, I know the car performance is not all there, but I'd argue that the bigger problem is the communication issues that they continuously have on both. Well, I mean, they had the promise of a really strong finish in Canada if they were just a bit sharper on the pit wall, and they just used their ears just to listen to Charles Leclerc. He could have stayed out. He could have even won with some luck. Obviously, he wouldn't have, but Ferrari couldn't have known that they wouldn't. So it's something we're saying time and time again, which is a shame. And I thought it was something that Fred Vasseur had really begun to fix after the Binotto era, where the strategy was getting more and more outlandish. They were bleeding points left, right, and centre. So the forward to seeing what the upgrades do. Certainly, we'll probably get the lay of the land in qualifying, see where that puts them. But it's the race that I'm really looking forward to seeing how they have kind of rebuilt from the disappointment and the controversy that followed Canada and what was going on in the airwaves. I mean, from Hamilton's point of view, he's probably just hoping he doesn't come across another groundhog, and I think they're called like an Alpine marmot or something in Europe. So maybe he's just going to be looking out for them.
No idea.
Yeah, curious about Ferrari.
Yeah, that is an interesting point you make, Daniel, actually, about not listening to Leclerc, because there's definitely a few races that they've done that this season. And you're just watching that and almost like, I almost want to shout at the TV, just like, if you're not doing the strategy to how Leclerc wants, then why are you even here? Because like, I get that it's sure they may in some situations prefer to go with the strategy that they pick, but it just seems when they have their history of strategy decisions over the past few years, it strikes me as how confident they sometimes are in their decisions to not listen to Charles Leclerc, especially with all of the data and what he's experiencing in the car in terms of the tyre wear. It seems baffling, to be honest, as to why they don't listen to him. And they were really stubborn to not listen to him in Canada for some reason. But that's beyond me. But with Ferrari, obviously, we have got these upgrades come in. I think from what I've read about it, it's some revamped rear suspension. So I think somewhat earlier in the season, I want to say China I might be incorrect on that. Sometime earlier in the season, they basically, to align with the regulations, they had to have a much higher ride height than what they wanted to, which means they weren't getting as much ground effect for the cars and therefore not as much downforce. And so that's kind of, I think, what people have been going back to when talking about the Ferrari performance or lack thereof for the races up until now. Whereas this revamped rear suspension will mean that they can have a lower ride height and hopefully improve performance. And so I think that's the reason why there's a lot of pressure, especially on Fred Vasseur this weekend, because before, for all their performances, they could have used the excuse of, oh, well, we had to align ourselves with the regulations, we had to have a higher ride height, this is the reason why we're not having performances. When we have upgrades brought in, we'll be able to fix it. Now the upgrades are here, you haven't got an excuse anymore, or you've got much less of an excuse. We can't blame what happened earlier in the season for their performances. And so a lot of people, the investors, the stakeholders of the team are going to be wanting results now that they are seeing that their upgrades are being brought in. And so it's a massive weekend for, I think, Fred Vasseur and the entire team of getting some performance and getting some results finally out of this car. Because I think I'm right in saying that they've only had one podium this season from Charles Leclerc, which is totally, I mean, it's somewhere near that, but that is totally unacceptable from Ferrari, one of the greatest teams, well, the greatest team in Formula One history, arguably. And so it's, yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on Fred Vasseur this weekend to try and deliver some result, because the first half of the season has been seriously lacking results from the Ferrari garage.
It's just been really underwhelming, isn't it? They're not even in any of these discussions for popping up and surprising by being competitive once in a while. You know, they've been largely anonymous. So I do hope for their sake that this upgrade does have like a substantial impact. Do I think that's going to be the case? In truth, I don't really trust Ferrari anymore, nor does anyone else. So, it's all good hoping it, but we're going to have to wait and see if that materializes that way. I guess the next place I want to kind of talk about, because we know what the situation with Red Bull's going to be, but Verstappen specifically, is how likely do you guys think a race ban is, considering that he's very close to that magic 12 penalty points? He's also going to a track where you can get penalty points for track limits. It's a massive issue around here. You'll see that in our predictions as well. Do we think that he will have to try and have a conscious effort to keep his nose clean this weekend?
Ooh, I'll be honest, I hadn't really considered it much going into this weekend, because there have been so many points that this one's kind of after Canada, when he basically did nothing all race except pit a load of times when he was about to race a car. He didn't really do a whole lot. It's tough, because this is called the Red Bull Ring, right? This is Red home race, 100%. It's the home of Red Bull GmbH, which is the parent company. They're going to want to perform. Verstappen is going to want to bring home the win for the people who have given him championship-winning cars for the last 4 years, just like he did for Honda, right, in Japan. And I think part of that in Austria last year, actually, in how hard he raced Lando Norris and how much they were battling lap after lap for that victory, because he did it and the team really wanted it. And so I think it's going to be really hard for him if he does find himself in a semi-competitive car in a position where he can work a miracle to get onto pole position, for example. I think he's going to find it really hard to give it up if the McLarens are, or maybe even the Mercedes, are so to the Red Bull car. So in that sense, there could be a bit of skirmishing. And in that case, it would be easy to pick up a penalty point. On the track limits thing, I mean, the 2023 results didn't come out until like 5 hours after the race officially, because there were so many. It's like 1,200 infringements to go through or something, and so many penalties. I think they changed it for 2024, the track a little bit. They widened the white lines a bit, so it shouldn't be so much of an issue. And I really trust a driver like Verstappen to kind of have the spare capacity to think about that as well and control the placement of his car so he doesn't exceed track limits too many times. But definitely in wheel-to-wheel scraps, I think the kind of keep your nose clean philosophy could go out the window.
Yeah, I do really agree with Daniel actually on this point. I think that Verstappen's ability in that car means that I think he's quite unlikely compared to a lot of other drivers to get to have track limit infringements and that to actually lead to a penalty, because obviously you've got to have 3 for the warning and then another one to get a penalty. So unless I think the Red Bull car really isn't up to standard and is properly undrivable, meaning he's sliding about all over the place, unless that happens, I don't think that he's going to probably get any track limit points, and that to be the thing that contributes to the penalty points. Do I trust Verstappen to keep himself out of battles and out of collisions? Absolutely not. This is Max Verstappen we're talking about. And I do think, as Daniel was saying, I think this is kind of the perfect situation for that to happen, really, because as already mentioned, I think that Verstappen on a 1-lap pace is incredible. We've already seen that, for example, with in Japan, for example, with his 1-lap pace on the Saturday. I mean, he's in a very good chance of getting pole, but then I think the race pace of the McLarens will be far superior to the Red Bulls, which means he's likely to be needing to defend with his life that first place in the race. And yeah, it could get heated, like we saw with the battling last season, of course, and also from previous years, where we know that it can get quite heated around the Red Bull rings. So I think that a penalty point from some sort of collision or impact or something like that should definitely not be discounted from Verstappen for this weekend.
It would be a pretty wild story if he does end up getting involved in a skirmish. That's a bit of a 50-50, and then there's a lot of debate afterwards. I think that would be a very interesting timeline to see if the FIA will actually enforce the 12 race ban, the 12-point penalty race ban on the reigning world champion. So we'll see if that applies. Can
I just also ask one more question? Actually, sorry. If Verstappen does get a race ban, who do you guys think is going to replace him?
I think they'll try and get special dispensation to allow Lindblad in.
That's really left field. Do you think so?
I think they see him as a bit of a superstar, and they might do something not too dissimilar to what they did with Behrman, except try and get special dispensation around it. Because Ferrari were never going to put Behrman into the seat this season, right? But they see him as their prize turkey in some way, and so they gave him the opportunity to go into a car that was probably above his level, and then kind of learn and perform in there. I think they'll do a similar type of thing with Lindblad.
Agile, I feel I don't know. He said before, hasn't he, Agile, that he's not ready, but he's curious as to how it would go in that Red Bull. If I were Red Bull, I'd just satisfy that curiosity. If I were Christian Horner, I'd be curious as well as to how Agile would interact with the car, as well as Agile being curious how the car interacts with him. And he's been performing so well this year. Lindblad's still such an unknown quantity, and he's got so much time. But when you're so congested, junior team kind of ladder and everything that's going on there, I just want to get the ducks in a row, as it were, and know could be a reliable replacement for maybe Tsunoda if the ball form continues, or even Verstappen if he decides to leave. So I think that kind of clarity is would be welcome for Red Bull.
I think it might end up being that Agile goes to Red Bull and then Lindblad goes to the Racing Bulls, because obviously with Lindblad, he's also unproven just in an F1 car in general. Obviously, we know he has some really good race pace, or has got some very good driving ability, but he's not been proven in an F1 car. We haven't seen what he's like in an F1 car in an actual race yet. Agile, you've already got that information. You've got plenty of information on that from this first half of the season, but you don't know how he's going to perform in a Red Bull car. So why not kill two birds with one stone, do 2 tests at once, see how Hajar is in the Red Bull car, and then also see how Lindblad is in a Formula One car. I think that's quite possible. But yeah, we really don't know. Obviously, it's a situation that might not even happen, because if Verstappen can get through the next couple of races cleanly, then it obviously resets. So yeah, it's unlikely. But yeah, just an interesting hope, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. Who does really fill in? But I don't see any other options outside of the two that we've kind of mentioned. I think Danny Rick's completely out of it. I don't think Checo would want to go back in, so I don't really see another other choice, really. Let's move on to the last point before the predictions segment of the show, and that is Colapinto's contract is supposedly up, his 5-race contract. Do you have any idea or any doubt regarding whether he would continue going into the British Grand Prix and Belgium and so on and so forth?
I don't think he's going to be replaced, if I'm honest. I mean, his performances haven't been brilliant, but then doing like I didn't understand the decision of getting rid of Doohan in the first place, because it was a bit of a similar situation. Like if someone had said, like get rid of Joe Guan Yu when he was at Sauber, for example. Like yes, he hasn't put in good performances, but then it's the car that's the problem, and I think it's exactly the same here. You can see with the fact that Gasly hasn't been able to get in many good performances yet. We know how good he has been in that Alpine car. He was the reason that they got 6th place last season, and he hasn't been up to speed. And so it's clearly a problem with the Alpine car itself and the pace in the Alpine car. So why get rid of Doohan? And the same argument applies here. Why get rid of Colapinto? Because you've even got more of a reason to keep Colapinto now, because you know that in a half decent car, which we've seen him in at Williams, we know that he's proven to be able to put in performances. I much think it's a problem at the moment with the Alpine car. And also as well, for the same reason that Red Bull aren't getting rid of Tsunoda at the moment, is that it seems a bit overkill to get rid of 2 drivers in a single season. And so I think that they're probably just for just the benefit of the team and just for the sake of stability, I think they'll just keep Colapinto at this point. I think it's not really going to do much difference if they bring in anyone else into that seat. I don't think Doohan could really get more out of the car than Colapinto has at the moment, or anyone else that Alpine has available to them. To be honest, anyone else that they have available is probably even more inexperienced than Doohan, so will likely perform the same, if not worse, than Colapinto and Doohan have done. So I really doubt that they're going to change anything.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, Alpine are an enigma. Stability's gone out the window for them. It did a long time ago, probably at least 3 years since they've had their turnover of team principals and now drivers as well. Problems just shifted a bit. Doohan and Colapinto, they've kind of gone into the same category, I think the same tier of drivers this year for me. They haven't performed on parity, I'd say, with each other, because Franco Colapinto has been a couple of tenths down compared to Pierre Gasly than Jack Doohan was, I believe. So in that sense, maybe the decision isn't so justified. I believe Alpine were more from Colapinto. I was hoping for more from Colapinto. I thought he would perform better than Doohan has. I don't think that's the case so far. Neither of them have points. Franco Colapinto's best qualified 10th, which he got in Canada. Jack Doohan's best was 11th, so there's not really a whole lot in it. But Jack Doohan's was on a weekend where the Alpine qualified 4th. So, you've got to kind of weigh them up. There are so many variables at play, and Alpine will have more data than we do. But you're right, at this point, I can't see a switch happen. I don't, like Callum said, there aren't really any viable alternatives either. So it's a bit of a mess. I'd be feeling very hard done by if I won. But I guess that's just the way it is, unfortunately, in Formula One these days, and with a ruthless head of team like Flavio, you don't really have much opportunity to perform.
I mean, I find it funny that you call an Alpine an enigma, because I think it's more just Briatore being incredibly reckless. But unfortunately for Doohan, that's just the way the cookie crumbles when you've got a team principal like him. So I think Colapinto's going to stay. I don't think there's any doubt in that. I think that 5-race contract is probably going to become a season-long contract. Cool, let's move on to our predictions now. Now, Lucy isn't here, but she has also given predictions as well. So we're going to have 4 sets of predictions to round out the show here. So, Callum, given that You're the guest. Daniel, we always see every week. Why don't you start with our predictions?
Oh, okay, right. I'm going to start
Pressure's
with
on.
mine. It really is. Well, I mean, if I prove anything from my time on this podcast is that I can't predict at all. So we'll see how this goes. So as I've already alluded to in this episode, I think that the 1 lap pace is going to go to Verstappen. I've put him down as the pole position, but then I think that McLaren have a very good chance to get him in the race. So I've gone with Piastri P1 and then Verstappen P2, Norris on the podium in P3. I've really liked Russell's pace in the car in the Mercedes, and also off the back of obviously amazing performance, a dominant victory in Canada. I do think that he is going to put in some good performance as well. So I put him in P4. And then P5, I've gone with Leclerc. I do think that maybe the upgrades are going to help a little bit. I don't think they're going to make the leap that they need to get near the Verstappen and the McLarens. But then that's a very big leap to make, so that wouldn't really surprise me. I don't think if they weren't able to do that. The driver to DNF, this one's a bit of a risky one. I've actually gone with Antonelli just because of the reliability issues for Mercedes this season. There's definitely a couple of races, I don't know the exact number, but a couple of races which Antonelli has been unlucky enough to DNF in because of reliability issues that Mercedes have had. So I've put him down as the driver to DNF. And then my wild prediction, I've said that 3 drivers throughout the race, which can be on separate occasions, are going to spin out at turn 4. So that's the turn that is right at the end of the back straight near the top of the circuit, which is very close to the gravel, which means that we've seen that if a couple of cars are going in side by side, then usually one of them ends up on the gravel in that turn. So that's what I put as my wild prediction.
I find that last one a pretty interesting thing, because I actually think I've been surprised at how little we've had in terms of like spins and like incidents between the rookies, particularly at the back end of the grid. I'm surprised that they haven't. I expected a bit more. So if we do have 3 drivers spin out, it would be a pretty wild thing, pretty big surprise. So I like the prediction for sure. Daniel, would you want to follow up?
Callum, I have gone for Verstappen pole position. He's got pole every single race in Austria since 2021, and I can't see him letting go. I mean, the standout was 2022 when Ferrari were clearly faster, but Max did the business on Friday to get pole position. P1 is going to be Lando Norris. The bounce back.
Oh, okay. So
said a few times, but I mean it. I mean it this time.
Fair enough.
I mean, he obviously loves this track. He almost won last year, and he would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for Max. First career podium here as well, so what better place to get the win? And Verstappen will be P2. I think it'll be a close fight, but maybe not quite as close with contact. The Orange Army will be quite disappointed to see Max get so close, but I think that's the way it's going to go. George Russell P3. Like we've said, we have no clue what Mercedes are going to do. They could dominate or they could finish outside the top 5. So I've done the only sensible thing and put him back to his kind of deep in 2025, which is P3. P4, I've gone for Charles Leclerc. Ferrari's upgrades, again, big unknown. Ferrari's communication, big unknown. So we'll see where that takes them. And P5 is kind of a tentative prediction. I've put Alex Albon. Williams have really faded recently. Spain didn't suit the car. Canada, literally the wind direction changed and their car was never fast again after Friday. So, and obviously the reliability issues that Albon had as well. So, yes, I'm not entirely confident in that, but I didn't really know who else to go for.
Is there a notable omission here?
Oh, maybe we'll get to that later.
I see. I noticed that, and I was like, okay, what are you cooking?
My DNF is going to be Oscar Piastri. Okay, so my thinking is that the last 2 races in this season have been pretty terrible for both the championship rivals, respectively. I mean, Max in Canada with the head loss and finishing outside the points, and then Norris in Canada driving into the back of his teammate. So maybe there'll just be a little trend, these 3 races, maybe the championship leader this time is going to be struck with the the curse of the three rivals, three race trend. It might be a reliability thing. They've got a Mercedes engine in the back of that. McLaren might finally go pop. They have been a very reliable team this so far, though. So I'm not sure how likely that will be. And my random prediction is that a driver who is on the back row of the grid will finish in the points.
I like that last one. We haven't had something like that before. Are you saying that we're going to have a top 5 team finish on the back row in qualifying, or do we think this is just going to be a pure surprise from like a Haas or something along those lines? What angle?
Well, to be honest, when you look at it, I think if I've statted correctly, it's happened twice this year. The first time was actually Ollie Behrman in Bahrain when he went from 20th to 10th. And then Yuki Tsunoda did it again in Imola when he qualified last and came through to finish in the points. So it could literally be a Haas who just have a stinker in qualifying and then, as Haas do, just kind of turn up in the race out of nowhere and decide that they want some points on that day in history. So I guess we'll find out.
You've kind of covered yourself with a couple of different angles there, which is nice. But it's one of the more unique ones for sure. We haven't had something like that before, have we? Let me do mine and then I'll do Lucy's. And I'm glad Lucy isn't here for this one, for this set of predictions, because I don't think she'd be very happy. I put pole position as Lando Norris. I think this is the weekend where he decides, okay, I'm gonna put a line in the sand behind everything that's all of his struggles this season, and this is where the comeback begins. I think he'll convert this pole into a win on the Sunday. I think it'll be a 1-2 for the McLarens. I think Piastri will be tucked in behind in second. I think Verstappen's going to make it interesting in third, but I just think that the McLaren should have this covered. In fourth, I've gone George Russell. I think that's an incredibly safe thing to do. He loves to finish third or fourth, so either one kind of guarantees me points. And fifth, I've gone left field. Now, normally Lucy's the one who always goes left field and puts a Williams here. You know, that's something that she likes to do. I've decided to put a Kick Sauber in the top 5.
Oh no!
And I've said Nico Hülkenberg finishes 5th.
Right, at least you picked the right Kick Sauber, who is most likely going to get up there. Yes,
I just think that they've shown good race pace, particularly, and I think Austria is the type of race where you do get incidents in the midfield, be that retirement or collisions and stuff like that. And so I think this type of environment can generate a overperformance from the likes of a Kick Sauber, and I think they're the most likely to kind of surprise. I feel I've got a little bit more confidence in them to have a surprise result compared to Aston, even though I'm more confident in Aston getting points consistently, if you know what I mean.
I think you've done well to go for Hülkenberg. I think he's a bit of an Austria specialist. You know, last year that was the first of his back-to-back P6 finishes with Haas was Austria and Silverstone when they were kind of on that roll. So if he replicates that, you'll get a point. And also, I remember, I think it was the sprint race in 2023, which was wet to dry and had a great opening lap. And Hülkenberg got up to second on the opening lap, and everyone was like, "Oh, is he going to get a podium in a sprint race? That'd be crazy." So I think he's actually the GOAT of Austria, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he goes in that newly upgraded Sauber.
The GOAT of Austria is not a phrase I would attach to Nico Hülkenberg, but I like the sentiment. Cool. My DNF. This is why I had to throw this in now that Lucy isn't here for this one. I put a DNF for Alex Albon. I think, like Daniel mentioned, Williams have had a set of rotten luck recently, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it's me willing that to happen, but just for the sake of the podcast. But I could see that continuing, at least with one of the two cars. So I've put Alex Albon slightly as rage bait as well, which is nice. And my wild prediction is a track limit rated one. I've gone my wild prediction is over 10 black and white flags. So I'm expecting more or less this is going to be majority of which will be track limits, I feel, because we've seen lots of people get flags before, and I think this is the type of circuit which can generate something as wild as this. So, well, hopefully that happens. I'll go through Lucy's as well. And she's actually changed tactic here because I'm not seeing a Williams in the top 5. Maybe this is her trying to reverse jinx things instead, because she said pole for Lando Norris, like I did, and she said Oscar Piastri would take the win. She also thinks that George Russell will finish second and Norris in third. So Norris dropping back from pole could mean another Norris bottle. Who knows? Leclerc in P4 and Verstappen in P5. She said that her DNF is Yuki Tsunoda and another track limits related penalty, in at least 5 people getting a penalty for track limits. Now, 2 people have gone track limits related penalties. 2 of us haven't, have we? So a nice even split.
You mean you stole it from Lucy?
No, don't do that. I was very clear. Let's be clear. I said a track limit related penalty last week. So in fact, she was inspired from me. So that means that I've got cultural impact and she doesn't.
So it's just
interesting that Lucy is not here, so she can't defend herself of this.
Absolutely, this is exactly the reason why I'm speaking up.
To be fair, if you get that prediction for 10 black and white flags, that'll be incredible.
I did look back and think, 10's a lot, but I was like, you know what?
It's quite a lot actually. Yeah, I mean, you're right that the black and white flags, there are going to be a lot of them for this race, because we know that track limits have been a serious problem beforehand, especially in the last turn. But it's yeah, but who knows? Maybe.
Hopefully that materializes, and then I look like a genius, because I'm coming off the back of a 0-pointer last race weekend, and I can't have 2 0-pointers in a row. Cool. Let's round out the show there. I want to thank my guests, Callum and Daniel, for coming on and joining me for this preview for the Austrian Grand Prix. We will be back at some point next week to unpack the events that have happened this weekend. I've been your host, Anwar, and I thank you guys for listening and watching from your seats at home. So until next week, or next episode, we'll see you then. Goodbye.